up, guys? Rad Dave here. Welcome to this week's edition of the Rad Report. This week, we're going to be talking about playing random, why it's considered an insult in the FGC to be random, what it means, and my thoughts on it. And to start off, the reason that I chose this topic is because someone was talking on Twitter about Punk and how funny it is that Punk calls everyone random or a bot when he plays against them. And it got me thinking, A, it's pretty funny. It's a good insult. And B, it's a weird insult, though, because it's like not really something in other genres that you could really call someone random and have them be like, damn, bro. Like, people get offended if you call them random. But so it's a strange insult. So I was like, what does it mean to be random? Is it bad? Like, is it necessarily a bad thing? So we're going to kind of dive into it. And not to bury the lead too much, my thoughts on like kind of a random play style is that they can be pretty hard to deal with. But I think the issue with them and why I consider them to be bad is that I think they have quite a ceiling, and the ceiling might be lower than people think. And it's definitely like a ceiling that's much below like winning tournaments or really even competing in tournaments. Like competing is in like placing in tournaments, right? It's much lower than that. You're kind of maxing out at a higher or at a lower ceiling. And I think that can be problematic. But other than that, I'm not really going to sit here and tell anyone that their play style necessarily is bad. I just think like if you're trying to get better or be the best that you can be, I think you're going to be realizing in time that that play style has quite a ceiling and that you're going to reach it quicker, and you're going to have to kind of break those habits to get past that ceiling. So when we talk about random, what do we mean? And usually when we're talking about people playing very random, it means incredibly risky. That's generally what people are referring to when they speak of random, is just that you take risks, but not just that you take risks that are like unnecessary. Risks in which the reward is low and the risk is high. And I've kind of been breaking it down in my mind, and I think there's 3 reasons why people play random, and I think those 3 reasons all come with like different kind of ceilings. So the first reason, and I'm sure we've all played against this person, is they do something very, very risky, but it's pretty clear that their execution is very poor. And the reason that I say that is that what they do risky might not even be something they intended to do. It might just be something random that kind of came out because their execution is so bad they were trying to do something else, and that came out. And this kind of person, like, I think we've all been there also playing a character that's like new to us. Like if we've just played any new game or any new character, I think we've all been in this situation where our execution is so bad that all of a sudden you're getting inputs you never wanted to get. For instance, like in Dragon Ball, I sometimes will be learning a new character and I'll forget. So Dragon Ball, the special moves are quarter circles, and I'll forget sometimes which quarter circle refers to which move, and so I'll be trying to end a block string, and all of a sudden I'll just end the block string in a DP that's super punishable. That wasn't intentional. That wasn't me trying to run a gimmick or anything like that. That was just me kind of forgetting the controls in the moment and, you know, doing something incredibly risky. Now this kind of play style it's hard to even call it a play style, right? Because like the more that you play the game, like obviously that like this kind of random has a very low ceiling. You're not going to go very far if you can't execute or can't do the controls. But also, I think most people break through this ceiling relatively early. So like, I don't really have any long-term concerns for this kind of player. The next kind of random player is going to be that player that like doesn't really have the knowledge, doesn't really understand frame data maybe, and they just kind of do things because they don't understand the consequences of the moves they're doing, and they don't really understand how risky they actually are. They don't understand punishes. They don't understand that what they're doing is essentially leading to them dying. A lot of times they're either just like getting frustrated, or they just don't look into it further. As I was grinding ranked in Guilty Gear Strive, so the way that the ranked works is that you go open floors. So what I was noticing as I was climbing the ranks between like 7 and 9 or so is that every single Potemkin that I was playing was doing Mega Fist, and then, which is a very minus move. It's very minus. It's even punishable at some distances, but if you spread it out, it's minus, but definitely not punishable at like the distances it's usually used. And what I was noticing is all I had to do is kind of stick out any sort of button, and I would counter hit the person out of whatever they were trying to do next. And I think what they were trying to do, if I just would like one of those times not try to counter with anything. I think they were trying to go Mega Fist into Mega Fist, because they just don't really know better, right? They don't know that the move is so minus that they just can't take their turn back, So that's one of those kinds of random where you're like, dang, they're really making these risky decisions. Why are they doing that? It's really that they don't know any better. And it's this kind of random that like I don't tend to get frustrated with either, because like if they want their ceiling to be relatively low, which is like just having fun in the game, that's totally fine. And if they do want their ceiling to rise and they want to become a tournament player or just like climb the ranks or whatever it is, they tend to get there, right? Like I was at that level of play at one point in my life. I didn't know anything about frame data. I didn't really understand why I was dying for the things that I was doing, but I wanted to get better and I was able to push through that. And so that's not really a type of random that like frustrates me or I think is necessarily bad. I just think it's like a necessary part of being a fighting game player, right? Honestly, the first two that I talked about, the poor execution random and the you don't know any better random, are both just like normal parts of fighting game. So the third kind of random that we're referring to is the kind that I tend to have a bit of an issue with, and it's the kind that I can get frustrated with, and that's that they are just unbelievably risky all the time. They understand the frame data, they understand why what they're doing is risky, but they continue to do it anyway. And this kind of player is frustrating to me because I think their ceiling is actually relatively high. I think something I've learned, so recently I was able to make it to Celestial VIP in Guilty Gear, and something I noticed when I got there is I expected everyone to play kind of, by the book, quote unquote, like not as risky. They would take less crazy risks. They wouldn't be these random players that we're referring to. And what I noticed is quite the opposite. A lot of people are up there just sending it all the time. Doesn't matter when. They don't get conditioned. They don't learn. They just continue to do it. That's their play style. They struggle to open you up if they're not doing something very risky. And so I got there and I realized, I was like, dang, the ceiling for this kind of play style is actually much higher than I thought. I think it kind of hovers somewhere in between like online stud and tournament player. It's like somewhere in between that, like placing in tournaments, online studs, somewhere in there. And that's pretty high, right? For a lot of people, that's like what their goal is in a fighting game. Their goal in a fighting game is just to be good online. Like that is the game to them. They're not going to go to tournaments. They're not going to do it anymore. They just want to be good online. And the reason that, this kind of play style can be frustrating is because the ceiling is so high. It can be so successful, but at the same time, there is that ceiling, right? That ceiling exists. You're not really going to become the best player you might be able to be just by sending it all the time. The other thing that's frustrating is that the ranked online environment actually incentivizes for this kind of thing, right? So the idea behind ranked is they're very short sets. They don't give you a lot of time to adapt to. And a lot of times you go into a ranked set, you don't know what your opponent's going to do. You're going to assume they play like, that character that you've seen before. So for instance, if I go up against a Kai, I kind of expect them to play like the other Kais that I see online. Until you show me otherwise, that's how I'm going to show you. Or that's how I'm going to treat you, and that's what I'm going to expect. So, and then all of a sudden, they're stun dippering all over the place. They're just flipping and dipping in neutral. And you're like, damn, this person plays like a goddamn maniac. And by the time you really adjust to it, they've already won one game in one round, right? And now you're like, well, in the first of three, I'm really behind the 8-ball. And so that's why it can be difficult, is that you're playing short sets, and then at the end of the day, you're more incentivized to win in ranked than you are to lose necessarily, right? The way that the points work, the way that the floors in Guilty Gear, whatever it is, the points in Dragon Ball, whatever we're talking about, it tends to reward you more for a win than it penalizes you for a loss. So the idea is like you can lose every now and again. Like you're going to go up against people that are going to be ready for your risky BS, and they're going to smoke you. But at the end of the day, that's fine. You only wasted 10 minutes of your life. You're going to move on to the next person who, again, has to adjust to your BS all over again, right? And so it actually kind of incentivizes this kind of crazy play style. And as I mentioned before, like, that's why I kind of get a little frustrated by this, is that I think that not only are you not living up to your potential as a player because you're kind of going to hit that ceiling at some point, it's actually like, in the interim, in the short term, it's getting you that ranked results. Like it's getting you those ranked results. It's not really forcing you to learn fundamentals. It's just kind of like, you know what? Send it and get to the limit. Get to the limit of what this play style will get you to. And then the thing that I have a hard time with is that if you then reach that summit of essentially the maximum level that you can get to being an incredibly risky random player, if you reach that summit, you presumably haven't really gained the skills required to get beyond that, right? You've just kind of been carried by the ranked system and playing in a way that kind of exploits it. And so in that way, like if you wanted to then get better, I think you're really behind the 8 ball because you haven't had to develop the fundamentals required to push above and beyond that ceiling. And so generally that's kind of my thought on the play style. So situation 1, you know, you're random because your execution's poor. I'm not going to get mad at you. It's a normal part of fighting games. Situation 2, you're random because you just don't really understand the consequences of what you're doing. You don't understand frame data. I'm not going to get mad at you. Normal part of fighting games. Situation number 3, you have adopted an incredibly random play style because it's very difficult to deal with in a short set. That's the kind of play style where I'm like, I don't love it. I don't respect it. I don't like it. I think you're holding yourself back. And also, I think in general, it actually causes the person playing against it to kind of develop bad habits. That's the other thing that kind of frustrates me, is that if you're expecting someone to send it all the time, you go up against like a really solid player that has a lot of fundamentals and they're not sending it, is when you're going to take risks, really think about it. Think about the situation that you're in. This goes for any part of fighting game. Always think about the situation you're in. Think about the risk reward, whether or not, you know, if you're on a pixel of health and you need a massive comeback to win, it might be a good time to take a risk, right? Your risk is actually quite low because you're probably going to lose around anyway. And your reward could be potentially really high. So that seems like a good time to take a risk. Or, you know, you were pretty much consigned to losing the round anyway. They drop a combo. You have a second chance at life. That's a great time to take a risk. You have nothing to lose. You're playing out house money, right? So there are times where it's really good to take risks. I'm not saying this video, or I'm not putting out this video to say never take risks. I'm just saying maybe analyze your own play. Figure out if you feel attacked at all by this video. Look at your own play and figure out, do I take risks because I don't know how else to open up my opponent? Or do I take risks because I thought the risk reward was in my favor in this moment? And if the answer is A, then try to be more cognizant. Try to be more cognizant of the risk you're taking. Try to understand the situation better. Try to work on other parts of fundamentals. You know, play a couple games where you say, you know what, I'm a Kai player. I'm not going to do a single stun dipper or neutral, not a single one. And try to figure out other ways to win. I think it's just going to make you a better player overall and a more dangerous player overall. And if you're in the second category of you really only take risks because you think the risk reward in your player, great, you're doing phenomenal. Yeah, but I do think kind of looking at your own game introspectively in this way